Hey guys, my name is Rob, and today we're unboxing and reviewing the BigBig One Blitz 2. This is a wireless controller compatible with PC and Switch, and there are actually two versions of this controller, the TMR version and the Alps version. I picked up the TMR version because I'm much more interested in TMR joysticks, and if I understand correctly, the only real difference in the two are the sticks, and the Alps version has different coloring, obviously. I'm not intending to review the Alps version, but I know that Clef over at Game Tech Talk did an unboxing and hands-on with that version a couple of days ago if you'd like to check it out. My pre-order from Gadget Hyper also included these additional thumbstick caps, so we'll take a look at those as well. I actually never owned the original Blitz gamepad, but people raved about both that and the Rainbow 2, so I'm pretty excited to try this one out. So we've got the paperwork on top here. We have a booklet style manual, which is good, and then we have a support card here. I did try scanning this code, and it does take you to the support page on BigBig One's website. Then we have the USB dongle. It's a 2.4 gigahertz dongle and has a pairing button and the NearLink logo. And in theory, this is going to give us 2000 hertz pulling rate wireless. Then we have a USB-A to USB-C cable. This is a braided cable, and it's also very thin and light. It kind of reminds me of the GameSir cables, which I like a lot, although this one is a 6-foot cable, not a 10-foot cable. As usual, we'll save the gamepad for last, and nothing underneath. And then we have 4 extra thumbstick caps as well as an 8-way D-pad. Then finally we have the controller itself, which I'm really excited to check out. So this gamepad has a pretty unique appearance, and the first couple of things that came to mind when I saw it were Transformers and Nerf guns. I don't know if that's good or bad. I assume some people will appreciate the aesthetics and others will hate it. I kind of like it myself. Since this is the TMR version, we have TMR joysticks obviously, so drift shouldn't be an issue. I do kind of wish the tension was a little bit higher. They kind of rattle a lot. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to hear that through my mic. I think this is because of the way the removable thumbsticks are designed. So to change these, they just pull off, and they have these 3 tabs that snap down into place. And then this ring on the outside, this metal ring, has some play. So I think that's where that rattling sound is coming from. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I think they're fine. It's just a little noisy. And then this also comes with some additional caps. So these are the default ones that were installed. These are the shortest ones. And then it also came with 2 each of the medium and the long ones. And then these are the replacement caps that came with my pre-order. So we have 2 black bases that won't match this controller at all. Then we have a full set of 6 caps. So there are 2 short, 2 medium, and 2 long here as well. And I actually really like these. They're convex, which I prefer on the left stick, and they have a really nice grip to them. They're really simple to install. You can see the 3 holes, and there are 3 pins here. So you just orient it the correct way, and they just snap into place. The ABXY buttons are mechanical. They feel good and they sound good, but honestly, I wish they hadn't gone with the classic colors for the lettering. I wish they had just done the dark gray or the orange to match the rest of the controller maybe. I think that would have looked better. The D-pad is also mechanical and feels really good. It sounds good as well. And we also have an 8-way D-pad included, and this is also really easy to change. It's just held on by friction, so you just pop it off. And you can see here there's a pin on the top, so that's how it's oriented. Same thing for the replacement one, so it just snaps on. Yeah, I like that better. I'm actually just going to leave it on there. I typically save this for later in the review, but we're trying something new today, so we're going to go over all the rest of the front buttons and what they do. The logo here is the home button. Holding it for 2 seconds turns the controller on and off. On the bottom row buttons going from left to right, the first one is the turbo button. You can set turbo by simultaneously pressing turbo and the desired input, such as a face button. That light flashes twice to let you know that it's set, and now when you hold down that face button, that light will blink to let you know that the turbo is working. You can disable turbo on a single button by holding down that button and then double tapping the turbo. It'll flash twice to show you that it's disabled, and now it's no longer on. You can also just double tap turbo by itself, and that disables turbo for all buttons on the controller. This light is also a button. It's actually the function button, and when you have turbo set, you can hold the function and click left on the D-pad to cycle between speeds of 5, 10, and 20 inputs per second. And the function light will actually flash at whatever speed you have set, so it's pretty clear where you're at. The second bottom row button here is the remap button, and just to be clear, you can only use this to remap the 2 rear buttons and the 2 additional shoulder buttons, but you can use the app to remap pretty much all of the inputs on the controller. To use the remap button, you just hold it and one of the M buttons down for 2 seconds, and then the function light will be in breathing mode, and then you just tap whatever input you want to map to it. It'll flash twice to let you know that it's done. Clearing is just like clearing the turbo. You can hold down one of the M buttons and double tap the remap and it'll flash twice to clear it, or you can just double tap remap and it clears all of the mappings. The third button is the macro button, and you can use this to record macros on the fly. Just like the remap button, you have to assign it to one of the M buttons, and it's the same process. Hold the macro button and one of the M buttons for 3 seconds. The function light will enter breathing mode, and then you enter whatever combination of inputs you want. When you're done, press the macro button again. To clear macros from a single button, hold that button and double tap the macro button, or just double tap the macro button to clear all macros. The last button is the configuration button. That one's pretty simple. When you click it, it changes to the next configuration, so there are basically 4 onboard configurations. If you're in the first one, you can set up whatever you want to do as far as remapping, turbo, all that stuff. You can go to the second one and set different things up, so on and so forth. There's some other cool things you can do with this function button. If you hold function and press right on the D-pad, that switches the rumble motors on and off. You can only do on and off as far as on the fly, but in the app you can set different levels. And then you can also hold the function button and press up and down on the D-pad, and that changes the volume level on the PC. Out of the box, the Blitz 2 does have built-in dead zones for the joysticks. You can hold the function button and press down on either joystick, and it changes the dead zone to 0. I'm sure everyone could guess this, but these 3 middle buttons are menu, view, and screenshot. Moving on, finally, we have mechanical shoulder buttons. These feel and sound good, just like all the rest of the mechanical buttons, and these can be actuated literally anywhere on the button. We also have the extra shoulder buttons, M3 and M4, which are also mechanical. These feel good. I like the positioning pretty well. I don't know why I always have this issue, even with this controller being shaped so differently than everything I've been using that's had these buttons. For some reason, the right one seems really easy to get to me, and the other one, I feel like I need to stretch for it or I'm going to accidentally be pressing the trigger. Speaking of triggers, this is pretty wild. We definitely have the mouse click triggers that I'm always looking for. In fact, that's all we have. No trigger stops because these are strictly mechanical buttons, no analog triggers. I know this is probably a negative for a lot of people who play a variety of games, but what can I say? I'm good with it. I'm sure I'll spend some time harping about this later, but for now, I'm just going to say that the rear buttons feel good. They're mechanical switches as well, so they feel great to press. They're in a good position. I like them. There just aren't enough of them. And, really, it feels like there's plenty of room on this controller. Actually, these rear buttons are so huge that I'm not sure why they didn't just split these and have 2 buttons right here. I feel like that would have worked out okay with positioning and everything, so just, as usual, annoyed. And I know we've got 2 extra buttons up here, but that's just not the point. So overall, design-wise, the Blitz 2 is, I don't know, a little odd, I guess, but I do like it. It feels very different in hand than any other controller I own, but it's comfortable, and it's helped a lot by this rubberized grip that covers a really large surface area, so that pretty much everywhere my hands aren't on a button or an input, they're on rubber. So I'm a fan so far, but let's hop over to the PC, check out the app, and do some testing. So this is the BigBig One Blitz 2 app, which is specifically for this controller, and you can download it directly from their website. Unfortunately, the app isn't great. You can't resize it, you can't maximize it or anything, and it's a little hard to read, at least on a 1440p screen. It's also a little bit confusing to navigate, but it does allow you to do a lot of customization that you can't do with the on-the-fly programming. So this first tab is the configuration page. Here you can set up and save different profiles. I only have one profile set up, but if you have additional ones, you can hit the 3 dots here to edit or configure any of those profiles. You can also click the gear icon to just go in and edit the currently equipped configuration. The first subtab here is for motion, so this is the gyro settings, and you can select whether you want the gyro to mimic the left or right joystick, or off, which is closed for some reason. I haven't tested the gyro on this controller, or any other controller for that matter, because I just don't use gyro, but I know people ask about it a lot in the comments, so I do intend to find a game to start testing it in the future, eventually, maybe, hopefully, don't quote me on it. The second tab is for the sticks, and you mostly have the settings you would commonly expect. You can set different stick response curves, which I never really do because I set response curves in games, so I don't want that to be manipulated by what I physically set on the controller. Then we can adjust dead zones, which I have set at 0. I assume the joystick circle is the outer dead zone, but none of these help icons actually work. Like nothing happens, it just shows you the label again. So I don't know for sure, but that's what I would assume it would be. You can adjust it up and down just like the dead zone. And then if we keep scrolling down, we do get a physical representation of the response curve. And then we have stabilization factor, which I haven't messed with much yet. And again, these help icons just don't do anything. Below that, we can adjust the center gain point. And you can see that I do have some jitter with the dead zone set at 0. So in theory, you can do micro adjustments here by changing the center point. So like we can see that the x-axis is jittering positive, so we would want to move the point negative to try to eliminate that. And then the opposite with the horizontal, it's jittering negative, so we want to move it positive. So you can do this and probably get it closer in the long run, but I'm going to test this out in game without adjusting that first and see if I have any drift, because I don't want to move this center point if I don't have to, since it could also affect the outer dead zones. I'm just going to go ahead and set this back to 0 for now. We'll test it in game, and I'll report back and let you know. Then we have joystick directional triggering, which just means you can map each direction on the joystick to another input. And fortunately, you can do this for gamepad inputs and keyboard inputs. This is really important. I talked about this in a recent video, so I'm already really excited to try this controller out in game. Lastly, we can change the circularity algorithm to rectangular, which I've talked about in several videos, and this option is becoming more and more common on third-party controllers. Long story short, I'm setting the left stick to rectangular and leaving the right stick on circular because that's what I think is best for FPS games. And then you can also flip the X and Y axes independently. Moving on to the next tab, we have key maps. And this screen allows you to remap the majority of the inputs on the controller, including the view and menu buttons, and the screenshot button, even though it's not highlighted on the controller display over here. So just like the joysticks, you can map any of these buttons to gamepad inputs or to keyboard inputs, which is cool. Also, for some reason, you can map up to 3 simultaneous gamepad inputs or 2 keyboard inputs. It won't let you do 3 on the keyboard. I don't know why, but that's what I've found. Then the last tab is shake, which is kind of funny, but this is just the rumble motors. You can set left and right independently, and as always, I just turned these off. We'll go ahead and hit save here, and that actually takes us out of the configuration settings. I just realized that I forgot to mention that under keybinds, you can also turn on turbo for any of the inputs by just clicking the little radio button. Also, if you do any changes in here and back out and hit cancel when it asks if you want to save, it won't save the changes. The next tab here is for macros, and if you hit the plus button, you can set a new macro. Just like with the on-the-fly settings, you can only set macros to the 4 M buttons. You can change between tap, long press, tap to cycle, and long press to cycle. You can also add buttons individually down here, and you can set the duration and the interval manually. You can only do gamepad inputs though. There's no keyboard inputs on here, unfortunately. But you can also hit the play button up here and just enter the inputs on the gamepad instead. And that's obviously a whole lot easier as far as getting the timings exactly right. Alright, it wants me to save it before I clear it. That's pretty much all there is to the macro settings. The next tab is titled Debug, but it has a few things in it. The first is the connection method, where you can swap between, it says X input, PS5, and Switch, but the PS5 is really D input. This controller is not supported on PlayStation. I'm sure enough of that that I'm not even willing to walk in the other room and hook it up to check. The next option is step precision settings, and this is kind of confusing, but essentially it means step resolution. I just talked about the importance of resolution in a recent video, so I did spend a good bit of time messing with this and mostly came away confused. So they don't define what the first setting is, step accuracy, but this was the setting where I got the highest resolution results. 32 was the second highest, and 256 was the lowest. And I have no explanation for why the program points and analog points are off like this. I thought originally it was due to jitter, so I upped the dead zones. I also tried on different polling rates and everything else I could think of, but I ran these tests dozens of times and they all look like this. I also ran Joypad Tester and the resolution numbers matched based on the mode it was in, so step accuracy is the way to go. I also confirmed the polling rate is variable, and just like the Baton gamepad that I recently tested, I commonly got polling rates between 1300 and 1800 Hz, both wired and wireless, and the same was true in Gamepad LA tests. Getting back to the app, you can adjust the polling rate to 250, 500, 1000, or 2000 Hz. And then you can also calibrate the joysticks and the gyro. Again, I didn't test gyro, but the joystick calibration is just like with any other controller I've used, and it also calibrates the triggers when you do this. I assume it doesn't actually do anything to the triggers, since there aren't trigger locks to disable and these are mechanical switches, but I pulled them both anyway a couple times just to make sure, and I haven't had any issues either way. Then there's a quick switch to swap the D-pad and left joystick. And then there's an option to view the product manual, which currently doesn't work, but you can download a PDF version from BigBig website. The last tab here is the Update tab, and it shows that I have an upgrade available, but this is the same firmware version that I already have installed, which it shows you under the image of the controller there. For some reason, it shows all versions of the software to the right, so I guess you can downgrade firmware if you want to, if an update causes an issue or something, which we've seen with plenty of gamepads in the past. Last thing here, I just want to take a look at Gamepad Tester because I had some mild concerns about the circularity test, which is not something I say very often. Keep in mind that here I have the left stick set to rectangular and the right set to circular, but the differences between the two are pretty minimal. This is with the inner and outer dead zones both set to 0, but you can see on the right joystick that it's not actually confining the inputs to a perfect circular algorithm, and the stick is registering a bit outside of bounds of the testing circle. I get the same thing if I change the left stick to circular, and the main point here is that the circular and rectangular algorithms aren't actually very defined or unique. This isn't to say there's anything wrong with these TMR sticks. I've been playing and they feel great in game, but it's just a little odd, and it's not what we typically see when we have the option to choose between circular or rectangular algorithm. What you could do is increase the outer dead zones in the app, and when I move those up to about 10% on the left joystick, I get a more true rectangular algorithm, so I may end up playing around with this to see what works best for me. So what's the verdict? Well, I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's surprisingly comfortable considering, just the odd shape, the odd design. I wasn't expecting it at all. One of my biggest complaints at the moment is kind of stupid, but I'm annoyed that I can't turn off these RGB lights. I'm just not a big fan of them, and especially the green doesn't really match the rest of the controller. So they're kind of annoying, and you'll notice there was no lighting setting in the app. They're supposed to be according to the manual, but not so far. I also still wish it had 4 rear buttons, though the additional shoulder buttons and the keyboard mapping options do make me feel a little bit better about that part. Speaking of keyboard mapping, someone pointed out to me today in the comments on my Tarantula Pro review that this gamepad doesn't support the keyboard inputs in wireless mode. I don't know why that is, but I tested it today and I had the same result. Just for the record, the keyboard inputs on the Blitz 2 do work in wired and wireless mode with no issues. Overall, I love the feel and the features of the Blitz 2, especially with the NearLink chip and the super fast report rate. I think it's likely going to be a top tier contender PC controller for me. I've got a couple of hours in with it, and honestly, I want to just sit down and play and get more time on it and see how that goes. That'll have to wait a little bit though, since I also have this guy just sitting here waiting for me. I hope this video helped you out, and if so, please subscribe if you haven't already. Likes are also appreciated, and I do try to react and respond to as many comments as possible. I'll be doing more reviews regularly, so I hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching.